Good evening and welcome. My name is Tony Brewer, and along with Kyle Quass and Joan Hawkins, I'm a co-producer of this, the Writers Guild at Bloomington Spoken Word Series, our rather spooky October 2022 edition, virtual. This is one of our final shows in virtual land. We will, at least we are planning to be back in person in 2023. More news on that as that develops. We're sponsored in part by the Indiana Arts Commission, the Bloomington Arts Commission, and the Bloomington Urban Enterprise Association. The Writers Guild at Bloomington wishes to acknowledge and honor the indigenous communities native to this region and recognize that Indiana University is and the city of Bloomington were built on indigenous homelands and resources. We recognize the Miami, Delaware, Potawatomi, and Shawnee people as past, present, and future caretakers of this land. Had a couple of announcements to impart to you before we get rolling with our features this evening. Third Sunday Write is a virtual space in which you may find writing prompts and enjoy the company of other writers. Members visit a private Facebook page to respond to prompts that are posted monthly. You may then write and post anytime during the month and offer a response to the writing of others by sharing a readback line, that is, a line from their piece in the comments. For more information, or to join the group, contact Shauna Ritter at shauna747@gmail.com. Please include Third Sunday in your subject line. Coming up this Sunday, the audio play Homefront, written by Antonia Matthew, Writers Guild member. That is Sunday, October 9th at 8 p.m. on WFHB Community Radio, also streaming on WFHB.org. Homefront. Let's see. Homefront was originally produced in 2019 by the Writers Guild as a live audio play performed at the Monroe County Public Library. UK audio theater producer John Fryer then recorded vocal tracks in his spare time during 2020 and 21. And our dear friend here in Bloomington, Richard Fish, completed production earlier this year. And we are also working on broadcasting it over there on the BBC and elsewhere. We're also going to enter it in the DODIEs, which is essentially the Grammys for audio theater. Also wanted to mention next week, the Writers Guild of Bloomington is partnering through a creative collaborations project with Indiana University and the Writer Film Series. We're doing a series of films and some Q&A about the Beats, specifically Jack Kerouac, because 2022 is the 100th birth year of Jack Kerouac. So Friday, October 14th, IU Cinema will be showing Pull My Daisy from 1959. That's at 7 p.m. and there will be a Q&A to follow. And then Saturday, October 15th, the 2012 adaptation by Walter Sayles of On the Road, also at IU Cinema at 7. And then Sunday, the 16th, October 16th, the wonderful Chuck Workman documentary, The Source, all about the Beats. And that is at the Monroe County Public Library at 3 o'clock. And then Sunday, October 16th, Writer Films is presenting Anthony Harvey's The Dutchman, which is a short film based on an Amiri Baraka play from 1964, and that's a really really heavy piece, and we're thrilled to be able to find a cut that we can show you, and that is at 7 o'clock, also at the Monroe County Public Library. There will be Q&As after the Friday the 14th screening of Pull My Daisy, as well as after On the Road, and I believe Nan Brewer, no relation, myself, and Joan Hawkins will be on that panel. Let's see. And then lastly, our, that's wrong info there. The Dutchman is actually being screened at Fine Arts here on campus at IU on the 16th. Lastly, our monthly business meeting is Saturday, October 22nd at 3 o'clock, and that is, I believe we will also have the ability to stream that, but we'll be meeting in person at the Monroe County Public Library, room 214. All this info and more is available on our website or by liking or following us or hitting the little bell, whatever you want to call it, on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. We're active on all those platforms. You can also sign up for our newsletter by visiting our website, which is writersguildbloomington.com, all one word. Joan does a great job of putting together a wonderful newsletter, so be sure and sign up for that. And that's it for me. I'm thrilled to have our features for this evening, musician Ed Pedersen and prose writers DODIE Bellamy, James Dorr, and Joseph COONROD. Really looking forward to everyone. It's not often that we have 3 prose writers too, so I'm thrilled to kind of change things up a bit for tonight. First, let us start off with a bit of music. Ed Pedersen has earned respect for his own folk Americana albums, but it is his 9-year effort behind the production of the 3-CD 50-song compilation Song of America and frequent jazz free improv collaborations that have garnered him international recognition. His songs have been recorded by Betty LaVette and Candy Staton, among many, many others. Please welcome Ed Pedersen. That was great, Ed. Way to get us started off super creepy.
That was great, Ed. Way to get us started off super creepy. That was great, Ed. Way to get us started off super.
There we go. Pardon me. So creeped out. I have too many of me going at the same time. We'll have more of Ed a little bit later on. Our first feature tonight, I want to bring up DODIE Bellamy. DODIE Bellamy's latest books, both from Semiotext, are Bee Reaved, an essay memoir collection circling around grief, loss, and abandonment, and a new edition of her 1998 PoMo vampire novel, The Letters of Mina Harker. With Kevin Killian, she co-edited Writers Who Loved Too Much, New Narrative, 1977 to 1997. In 2018 and 19, she was the subject of On Our Mind, a year-long series of public events, commissioned essays, and reading group meetings organized by the CCA Wattis Institute. She is based in San Francisco. Please welcome DODIE Bellamy.
Hi, okay, I'll mute myself. Thanks for having me here, especially Joan. And I'm excited to read here, because I went to school in Bloomington. So, and I've not been back there since the 70s. So I thought I'd begin by reading a piece that takes place there when I was a student, or maybe it was in between being a student. I was kind of on and off. And it's actually before the event began, you guys were talking about the David Bowie movie, and this just happens to be about David Bowie. It was written for 2002, a catalog piece for a art show based on David Bowie. So it's called Can You Hear Me, Major Tom? And I'm sure there's a very different Bloomington than now from what I've heard. Space Oddity, with its catchy tune and stagey little space narrative, is surprisingly enigmatic, a poignant evocation of dystopic passivity. As he's bandied about by forces outside his control, Major Tom's fate is inevitable. The fixings for high tragedy were it not for his complacency. Here I am floating around my tin can far above the moon. Tom doesn't rail, he doesn't struggle. He merely drifts off, unplugged from marriage, fame, commodity culture. His rhymes are either sing-songy or off, dew, blue, moon. He's the Emily Dickinson of outer space. Space Oddity became my anthem in the summer of 1974 in Bloomington, Indiana, the summer I decided to be straight. I played it constantly as I broke up with my girlfriend, moved into a house with 4 gay guys, and started sleeping with a bisexual whom I thought gloriously handsome. My roommates were always bickering about that. Michael McQuillan, cute, they'd snarl, that closeted queen. I don't think so. Closeted meant he hadn't slept with any of them. Michael was blonde, Irish, his features regular except for one slightly roving eye that gave him an aura of the otherworldly. The night I met him, he was hitting on my friend Ted. You are so gorgeous, I drunkenly spewed at Michael, and you know it. To everyone's surprise, he took me home instead of Ted. I loved his body, the way it stretched out naked, warm, smooth, and long as taffy, long golden taffy. I loved to watch his cock spring up, dewy with youth and so grabbable. He was 21, 2 years younger than me. In my tiny bedroom, he rubbed my back with coconut-scented lotion, and to this day, whenever I smell coconut, I get all sentimental, overcome with an ambient eroticism I don't know what to do with. And the stars look very different today. My dresser was an ornate, dark wooden antique with bowed legs and embossed vines and flowers. Its frou-frou-ness inspired me to drape the bedroom with cloth, vivid floral curtains from the 40s, maroon, brocade swatches, white embroidered runners, eyelet lace doilies, a lavender Indian print bedspread. I hung the cloth across the window, over the top of the dresser, on the walls, and over the bed. The effect, half womb, half harem, was one my roommates loved. They were doubled up in the other two normal-sized bedrooms. So whenever I was out for the night, if they brought a trick home, they'd do it in my room, the trick room. I think my spaceship knows which way to go. I wasn't there that often, and when I was, I preferred to crawl in bed with Ken, the roommate I felt closest to. Not for sex, he wouldn't have tolerated that, but I was frightened of sleeping alone. Halfway through the summer, he said, "You can't do this anymore." "Why not?" I whined. "Because I don't like it." "Come on, Ken, why do you have to be so mean? Please." In case you're wondering, yes, we are still in contact. Major Tom's irrevocable isolation rhymed with my own displaced need for privacy. I couldn't stand to be alone, yet I didn't want anyone to witness my dailiness, an indiscriminate collage of fragments, random encounters. Like all young people, I was trying to forge a life of nonstop grandiosity, but I felt disconnected, simultaneously affectless and overwrought. I love the song's creepy sound effects clashing with its power ballad surges, then morphing at the end into a flourish of eerie dissonance. Bowie suggests the uncanny in the duet he performs with himself, two voices mingling and separating, then drawn back together in shaky alignment. I didn't analyze the song. I sucked it in through my pores, said yes. I put on the record and check out into a solitary erotic haze. The heat pours in through the windows. The light is so bright the room looks grainy. A group of us are lying down on the mattress on the floor and on the floor itself, and I stare at the speakers with their black mesh covers blown away. The first night he picked me up, I sat in his kitchen, impatient and confused, as Michael insisted on making some popcorn with Italian seasonings. While he popped and slathered on butter, I kind of gave up on the sex. But after we ate our popcorn, it did happen, light and playful, puppy sex. I didn't come, the downside to being straight. But afterwards, Michael told me I was the first woman he'd ever slept with he didn't feel guilty about. "What about guys?" I asked. "I never feel guilty about guys." Catholicism, I thought, is a very strange religion. Michael lived in a house with a swimming pool paid for by an English professor he was involved with. One morning, as I sat up in bed beside a sleeping body reading Soul on Ice, the English professor walked in, cartoon eyeballs popping all around. Michael had a job at the post office that paid 4 times what I made on work study. He got it, he bragged, by sleeping with a financial aid officer. I knew the one he was talking about and couldn't imagine Michael's gleaming ass touched by such a greasy, revolting pig. No matter how many times I fucked him, Michael was unavailable. Foolish as I was, I knew that, and it broke my heart. My heart broke the minute he touched me, but I liked it when he spent these older guys' money on me. It made me feel sophisticated and trampy, like a gun mall. I occasionally slept with other guys that I found bland, unsatisfying in their un-Michaelness. I kept doing it because when cuteness called, I answered. We all answered. My roommates showed me how they picked up guys outside the Monroe County Library. During the day, we went there to sit in their egg-shaped pod chairs. They had several of them on short pedestals, white ovals with red interiors that really looked like eggs, giant eggs with gaping mouths that swallowed you when you sat in them. We pretended the chairs were hatching us, our alien sandal-clad legs dangling from their lower lips, prepared to leave the capsule if you dare. At night, when the library closed, its sidewalk turned into cruising centrals. Guys came from all over town and languidly strolled around the building, their eyes scanning for contact, commencing countdown, engines on. I've been on that corner at night dozens of times, and I was amazed I never noticed this before. These lean, scraggly-headed creatures moving beneath the streetlights in slow motion, inching around the library over and over on a treadmill of sexual anticipation. I went barefoot whenever possible. At the most, I'd slip on water buffalo sandals, thongs with a hoop around each big toe, the soles thin as the vinyl that spun and spun. I wore a maroon dress from the 40s that belonged to my girlfriend's Hungarian grandmother, with nothing under it save a pair of nylon hipster panties, apricot or lime green. I liked the looseness of the dress, the way it slid over my breasts. It made me feel gaunt, though I was far from that. My hair hung to the middle of my back, bright strawberry, bangless, parted down the middle. Michael found me attractive, which meant for those couple of months I was attractive. I knew that when he tired of me, I plunged back into hideousness. I was terrified of that. The living room in our house was a mess. Pizza boxes, books, clothes, and records a foot deep. David Bowie's reedy voice, and I think my spaceship knows which way to go, quivering through the speakers, which by now had lost their mesh covers. I had to hop and tiptoe through all the junk to turn the album over. The turntable's cover was buried in the garbage, and I leapt on top of it, screech of plastic cracking and me howling, my foot bleeding. 1974. I was over drugs, over acid rock. Space Oddity proposed an existential groundlessness at odds with rock's optimistic linearity. With rock, you dropped a hit, headed out the door, and miraculously ended up at a Jefferson Airplane concert, marveling at the alterity of your journey. With Space Oddity, there's no destination at all, no place to arrive. A chord snaps and Major Tom free floats in the void. Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do. Bowie's tense fatalism and splendor spoke to my core. My life was a blur, but sometimes the blur would crystallize into lucid, amazing moments. Michael's body was one of those moments, his cock in such sharp focus, it cut me. He was a drunk, so every night began with us getting loaded at the Bluebird. Michael would ramble on about history and journalism, he was a double major, to anybody who would listen, his lame eye roaming with excitement, and I would zone out, waiting for the last call so we could go home to his place and sloppy fuck. When he wasn't around, I'd go out drinking with my roommates. There was always one of them ready to roar and picking up guys. So I ended up wasted every night, and I wasn't eating much except when Michael was paying for it. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. And one afternoon I passed out on an ancient leather sofa in the student lounge. I was awakened by some old lounge monitor lady. No sleeping in here. I hadn't been home for a couple of days. When I opened my front door, I was accosted by this horrible, acrid smell. I followed it into my bedroom. The top of my dresser was burnt. The wood bubbled and scorched. The cloth on top of it and the one hanging from the wall behind it charred. Their edges gnarled, a ragged, brownish charcoal. Who burnt down my bedroom? I shrieked. Ken emerged and said it was Phil. He was having sex by candlelight and he fell asleep. His tone was complacent, very get over it. So I sat on my bed in my stinky room and cried. I'll hitchhike to Florida, I vowed. Go stay with Dennis. Lift off. Okay, so, and then I thought I would read a bit from Bee Reaved, the latest book. So it ends with this really long letter to my husband of 33 years who died in 2019. And so a lot of the letter has his concerns in it. So it's always interesting to write using other people's imagery. So this is like, it's in order, but it's sections. So it reads a little different in the book. Okay, so the letter to him is called Chase Scene. And it takes place during lockdown, the year after like 7 months after he died, we went into lockdown. So it takes place during lockdown in San Francisco, which I'm sure is not that much different than lockdown in Bloomington. On the phone, Hetty and I were talking about which films we were streaming. I told him how with you, there wasn't much room to negotiate what we watched. It was either what you wanted or you acted distracted and bored. So I gave up and for years hadn't seen anything that wasn't big budget. You to me. I like to see the dollars up there on the screen. Me to Hetty. At least I never have to watch another fucking car chase scene again. Hetty told me to check out To Live and Die in LA, that it had a great chase scene. And so I watched it, and what an amazing movie. I jumped right into a hyper-focused research spiral. I read about the history of chase scenes, innovative milestones in the genre, what makes an effective chase, old school live action versus CGI. I watched a documentary on William Friedkin and this awful film he made after his career had tanked, showing a real life exorcism. On the internet, some killjoys found an early recording of Friedkin, in which he posted The Possessed Woman. Let me read that again. I fucked up that sentence. On the internet, some killjoys found an early recording Friedkin posted of The Possessed Woman. An audio specialist compared it to the woman's voice in the movie and determined that Friedkin had enhanced the movie's voice to make it sound more creepy. Like you, Friedkin couldn't control his storyteller impulses. Maybe in real life, the woman did sound more demonic than what the film captured. Maybe an appropriation of the real was more real than the real. An ancient memory comes forward. San Francisco, the late 70s, when I was making corporate slideshows, and the owner of the company, an ancient New Yorker named Gus, he was probably 50, who used to work in advertising, said that in the old days, to photograph tomato soup, they would put marbles in the soup to make it look bubbling. But because of truth in advertising government regulations, you couldn't do that anymore. Gus felt this was a great loss to bubbly soup photography. In chase scene, the antagonist and the protagonist often, in a chase scene, the antagonist and protagonist often get confused. And the audience doesn't know who to root for, the good guy or the good driver. The chase, according to Friedkin, is, quote, the purest form of cinema, something that can't be done in any other medium, not in literature, nor on stage, nor on a painter's canvas. The chase shows the obstacles. That's the end of the quote. The chase shows the obstacles, shows how bold or brave or desperate or even stupid the characters are to escape or pursue, shows how far they are willing to take it. There's buildup, shock, and aftermath. There is tension and fear. There is rhythm and flow. Cars zoom like jets. The cars' relationship to one another is a form of geography. The audience is the passenger. It is rare to walk down the street with a machine gun, but everybody's been in a car. Everyone's felt what it's like to lose control. Moviegoers sit on the edge of their seats, their feet on an imaginary pedal, ready to slam on the brakes. For my birthday this year, David and I got tacos from that place across the Safeway parking lot, then walked over to the coffee house on the corner of Sanchez and Dubose, got some iced tea, and ate the now lukewarm tacos at the tables on the sidewalk. Across Dubose, dogs ran freely in the park. You've been there, a block-long stretch of mottled grass and a few trees. David loved it, the nature, the taking off our masks and eating outside. He fantasized bringing his other San Francisco friends there to share the wonders, and he couldn't believe how delicious his shrimp taco was. Isolation had so heightened his senses, I imagined he could see the veins on each leaf. He was living in the moment, just like all gurus tell us to. But I felt a twinge of the tragic in what it takes to get a person to the point where so little inspires delight. It took my mother losing everything to discover I was worthy. She loved me because there was no one else left to love, and I gobbled up her love. David was right. It was a miracle to be sitting there with him. Later that evening, I walked over to the market in the Twitter building. On my way home on the corner of Mission and 11th, a man and a woman were holding hands. By the time I made it to our building, I was crying. I so intensely longed for someone who would care enough for me to hold my hand. I have the eroticism of a child. The chase chooses clarity over frenzy. No cheesy inserts or cutaways that take the viewer out of the scene. No maniacal editing. The chase remains coherent, fully inhabiting the primal excitement of the car's physicality, its constant closeness to death. No funny jokes by passengers in the back seat. The camera never leaves the inside of the car. When the audience identifies with someone besides the adrenaline junkie behind the wheel, the chase becomes even more thrilling, more visceral. There's no need for music, for the roars, screeches, and slamming of cars make their own music. If there is music, it thumps like a panicky heart. I don't know if we actually went together or bumped into one another, but I remember seeing John Carpenter / Stephen King's Christine with you at the York Theater on 24th Street in the Mission. As an ambassador of female rage, Christine did not disappoint. I remember us sitting in the smoking section and laughing at her evil hijinks, a red and white Plymouth Fury. We both loved King's neon flashing symbolism. This was 1983, when it would have been unimaginable that in 3 years we'd be married. From the trailer, once she lures you behind the wheel, you will be hers, body and soul. Christine may look like a car, but deep down, she's a possessed, ravenous cunt. Can an object have agency? Or as they put it in the trailer's voiceover, how do you kill something that can't possibly be alive? Do objects have power? In witchcraft, you move them around to make things happen, you believe. Do objects have feelings? When you throw them out, do they weep? We smoked cigarettes and ate greasy popcorn as Christine transformed Arnie from school nerd to punk, her speedometer spinning backwards, her tail fins erect as demons' ears. Neither of us was attracted to one another, but there was something. Christine's headlights flare, her windows turn black, signaling she is in evil mode, and the chase begins. The camera never enters Christine's interior. It is inaccessible except to our fantasies, and an extra diegetic stuntman who peers through a small patch of darkly tinted windshield. He races and crashes with no side view mirror, side or rear vision. When death is on our tail, it cannot be seen, only experienced. We run for our lives as Christine's blazing red infests our provincial aesthetics. Blood-colored jacket, shirt, beer can, lips. In the empty street in front of Dennis's house, the red-painted curb gleams like an artery to hell. Out of the darkness, Christine's headlights barrel toward us. So I'm going to stop there now because I've used my time up. But thank you for listening to me.
That was great, Dodie. Thanks so much. Really glad to have you here. Thanks for joining us here tonight.
Thank you.
Let's now have another music interlude by our good friend Ed Pedersen. That's great. Thanks once again, Ed Peterson. Fantastic set. A little bit more from Ed later on. Next, I want to bring up a good friend of the Writers Guild, local author James Dorr. James Dorr specializes in dark fantasy and horror with forays into mystery and science fiction. His The Tears of Isis was a 2013 Bram Stoker Award finalist for superior achievement, excuse me, for superior achievement in a fiction collection. Excuse me. With his latest book, Tombs, a chronicle of latter-day times of Earth, a novel in stories from Elder Signs Press. Dorr has been a technical writer and editor on a regional magazine, a full-time nonfiction freelancer, and a semi-professional musician. He currently harbors a goth cat named Triana and counts among his major influences Ray Bradbury, Edgar Allan Poe, Allen Ginsberg, and Bertolt Brecht. Please welcome James Dorr.
Hi, and thank you all for having me. And Tony, say hello to your cat. I heard going past. Zoom and I really don't go. Zoom and I don't get along too well together generally. This is probably mainly because I have older computing equipment that doesn't have all the bells and whistles. So there's a certain cobbling together involved. But we'll hope that things work okay for now. For a bit of background on tonight's reading then, it had been a time when the world needed legends, those years so long past now, because there was something else legends could offer, or so the poet believed. He didn't know quite what. Ghouls were not skilled at imagination. Their world was a concrete one of stone and flesh, struggle and survival predicated on others' deaths. Far in the future, when our sun grows ever larger, scorching the earth, when seas become poisonous and men are needed to guard the crypts from the scavengers of the dead, a ghoul poet will share stories of love and loss, death and resurrection. Now, this is a blurb from my novel and stories, if we can see it here. Tombs, a chronicle of latter-day times of Earth. And there are many stories that I've written of the tombs, not all of which appear in the novel as such. So it's one of these other stories that I'm going to read today, called Crow and Rat. It was originally published in Humenagerie, and this is a poetry and prose anthology that was published in England by Audenvale Press in 2018. And the story will be called Crow and Rat. And then one other note, if you do like the story or the background of the story, I will be reading another tomb set story, although not in the novel itself, on the Writers Guild's first Sunday prose, which I believe is going to be on November 6th at Morgenstern Books. And that one is at least currently scheduled to be a live reading. But courtesy of Zoom. His name was Crow and she was called Rat. Both were beggars in the new city, not the creative kind, jongleurs or tale tellers, gossip mongers or criers or news spreaders, but rather the shabby or desperate grubbers of others' detritus, ghouls, as it were, of the wealthier precincts, trash heaps and middens, petty thieves sometimes when courage and opportunity bless them. In other words, common enough to be unnoticed. Rat, in particular, lived in the sewers, a place forbidden and dangerous. Many a time she battled huge lizards, kin to the crocodiles known by the ancients, or vied with great underground spiders for the rights to a passageway opening, perhaps on the river, or possibly inland beneath some park where the wealthy are congregated at nightfall, perhaps to attend an entertainment, and thus unmindful of slender hands and arms reaching upward from some loose grating to clutch at purses or low-hanging jeweled pendants. Things that could be were sold on subsequent evening in parts of New City unknown to polite folk, where stores existed that bought such items, questions as to their provenance unasked. The days between were spent under the ground, safe from the burning rays of a sun grown ever hotter over the years, until even the rich could not go out in daylight unless protected by hats and thick, all-encompassing shadows. It was in such a shop that she met Crow, or rather she saw him as if from afar, for even among beggars there were some degrees of rank. Crow in his feather suit among the higher, he a thief who would swoop down from ledges often mere moments before a new dawn, when even the wealthiest must scurry homeward unwatchful and flustered, mindful only of reaching shelter before the sun's rising. Easy prey for Crow, black masked and black suited, loose folds outstretched as if wings to help guide him down. Razors attached to his boots like talons, a stoop and a grab, a pool of blood left behind, but rarely killing, especially if such a victim's companions could rally about him, helping him to his feet, acting as guides if need be for the final few blocks to his home. In a commotion caused, of course, helping Crow to escape, masked, possibly reversed, razors retracted, feathers turned inward, covered with mufti. Indeed, it was said sometimes the Crow even helped if a man had no friends with him, often gaining entrance to victims' homes that way, helping them to their beds, using the day then to loot at leisure, making his getaway first thing the next night. Rat sighed. She had heard of Crow. Rumors abounded. Some said that he could actually fly. Others said no, that he was a charlatan, just like everyone else of their station. A gentleman, yes, perhaps higher than most of the class of beggars, but he could afford it, as often they could not. And still others said he had no woman, no fair companion to help him and love him. His eyes fell on Rat, sinuous and dark-haired, almost a river princess in her sleekness, but in her case more adapted for slithering through pipes and joints, through tunnels and dark places. She too occasionally entered homes in the wealthier districts, emerging from drains that perhaps had been opened for repairs, their inward curving spikes no longer guarding the riches that lay above, waiting to be plucked like flowers from a tree, pulled down that way after her. Slender and slick, her skin a dead pasty white, her eyes met his too, hers red almost, his dark and beaded. Excuse me, he said as he shoved his way past. Milady, he added. She curtsied. My pleasure, she said. She had been taught that much by her mother, now long since deceased. She still remembered with horror the ghouls' work 3 days after, when her mother's corpse had been brought to them, dumped over the borderline into Old Sea, because no one had had the means to see it buried. She, for her part, vowed the ghouls would not have her when her time came too. Better to stay in the sewers where she lived, to let rats devour her. My pleasure, she said again. You are the one called Crow? But he had gone. He had already disappeared, his feathers turned inward to blend in blackness into the nighttime crowd. So life went on among those called the dregs of the beggars of New City. Rat had gained a small measure of notice because, so the gossip said, Crow spoke to no one. But he had talked to Rat, even excusing himself in his hurry, even addressing her as his lady. It was still a small thing, Rat tried to convince herself. He murmured something, even the taciturn sometimes did that when manners required it, even among beggars. He'd said milady, not knowing her name. And yet it was more. Her heart told her that much, pounding and fluttering whenever she thought of that moment. Now weeks passed. Whenever she heard a rumor come back to her, suggesting, exaggerated, of course, with retelling, as rumors are wont to be, that he had said not milady, but my love, that he had not just brushed against her, but kissed her, and possibly more, too, until only she knew the truth of the matter. And she knew one thing more that even in that encounter of moments, their eyes had met, sparking and dangerous, and that she loved him. As the months went by, she followed his exploits, though through rumors and broadsides. She never saw him again, except in crude pictures, but she attempted to see in her mind what his life must be like. And while she stuck to her own home and habits, she tried in her way to imitate what she saw, increasing her boldness, no longer, for instance, shrinking from spiders, except when she must bite, but now on occasion seeking them out herself, killing and eating them. This too was noised about in New City among the lesser well-placed of its beggars. This too was grist for the mills of rumors, no doubt exaggerated too in its way, nevertheless at base with some truth to it. Her skin did take a healthier sheen, her hair more luster. Some saw in her beauty. Perhaps she was worthy of one such as Crow. This the rumors said also. Rat was realistic. She dared not even hope, not when awake at least. But in her dreams, perhaps that was different. Perhaps in her dreams, perhaps even in his too, black feathers enfolded the white skin of thighs and breasts, his beak mask removed, perhaps red lips met those redder. Rat would awake shivering, yet overly warm as well. Sometimes she even feared that she might be ill, but as she plied her work, she felt her senses to be, if anything, more acute, not less. Her body to be stronger, not showing weakness. Her life was improving, if only because she had something to reach for. A thing she would not get. She was still a realist, but she could still aspire. All the time still seeking gossip of Crow's exploits, hearing almost every few weeks of some new adventure, bolder and more outrageous than those before. Sometimes hearing as well rumors of herself, some deed she had done, but as others saw it, those growing more noticed too. It was a strange feeling, happy yet sad also, exhilarating yet fearful as well, as she would wake trembling yet anticipating a new night's escapade set out before her. For success or failure, it may not have mattered. It was not the deed for her, the love was enough, never mind hope for its consummation. So it was for Rat the night Crow was killed. He, who the rumors said could even fly. However, when she came to see him, hearing the gossip, she found his body broken and alone, struck down by some disease of the sort that were rife in the new city's seedier neighborhoods. Who has come for him, she asked the city guardians who found him. None, milady, the first one said. The second one added, are you the one they call Rat? She nodded, yes. Then you must take him. From what we have heard, he had no other friends, no one else who loved him. She nodded again, and now she had his corpse, the things that were with it, his feather suit and mask, his purse empty, which did not surprise her as others had found them first. To the point, she had no money either. She thought of her mother, the ghouls, her vow as she dragged him into the nearest sewer. This was a cross pipe that led to the better residential precincts. She knew these pipes like the back of her hand. If she took another outlet to her right, she would come to the new city government district, its tallest buildings. She lifted his body, surprised by its lightness, a legacy of the illness that killed him. A plan was beginning to form in her mind. She would not let it be eaten by ghouls, nor by sewer rats either. She carried it in her arms, taking the right fork until she was under a building she knew, the Tour de Mayor, the mayor's tower. There she put it down and rested. She was attacked once, a marauding centipede, which she killed quickly, twisting its head from its thrashing body, avoiding its venomous fangs. Now she was angry. This was what it came to, that she might have Crow only when he was dead. Then she would do well by him, taking his corpse to the tombs herself, the vast necropolis across the river where those more fortunate than her kind were interred. She was an expert at breaking into places where she was not wanted, as Crow had been also. And why not the tombs then? But not by the causeway where dead were delivered on the groaning corpse carts that plied their way every night, flush with donations to pay for their passage, nor skulking by day as some poor people did, to leave their deceased by the charity gate in the hopes they might thus gain a pauper's shallow hole. No, Crow in his prime had been larger than life, and so in her way had she become also, at least among the lowest of the low. And thus, for both their sakes, she would at least try. She lifted his corpse again, this time stripping it, placing its feather suit on her own body. She studied the suit's secrets, finding out how it worked, how its wings stiffered with strong telescoping wires, letting one glide, if not actually fly, putting its boots on, trying out not just retractable razors, but strange suction cup devices on their soles, tubes that run up her legs, bulbs to control them, its similar gloves, its grapples and climbing hooks, trying his mask on. The next night, she stole a rope down by the river, coiled on a boat near an overflow outlet, braving the stench of the river's poisons. She paused for a moment to gaze at the tombs, its lights glowing green on the river's far side, engendered by luminescent fungi, and then to turn to the new city behind her with its harsher, brighter neon yellows and blues and purples, oranges and maroons, seeing above all its highest tower, the Tour de Mayor. The third night she lashed Crow's corpse to her own body, front to front, to leave her wing back free. She emerged from the sewer into an alley and started her climb up the great building's side. At the 10th or 12th story, she came to a ledge surmounted by gargoyles and projecting sills, the latter just high enough for her to creep under, Crow still roped to her breast. There she rested, avoiding the sun's rays as dawn became full day until the next night. This time she climbed with Crow 20 further floors up, getting increasingly used to the suit's secret features. And on the night following, 30 or more, who could count them all, until before she knew it, she had reached the summit. It was again almost dawn, but this time there was nothing higher in all of New City around her for her to hide under. She was in Crow's lair now. She gazed about her, standing at her full height at the blue ghoul lights to the south and far west, the great river continuing in darkness to north, the first glowing cloud tops to east and south where the sun would still arise in its deadly splendor, and at last again to west, nearer this time to the river, and past it across the causeway, still dotted with lights from the last of the corpse trains, the wall and its great gate, its portcullis closing, and beyond the tombs with its central step pyramid, where it was said an emperor was buried, the angel statue that marked its top. The angel looked toward the new city, but upward as well, as if its light sought to meet hers, as Crow's eyes had on that night so long past. But she had Crow now, and his feather suit too. She tightened the lashes that held the corpse to her, kissing it once on its dead yet warming lips, then pressed the buttons, extending her wings wires. Feeling the wind that rustled her feathers, catching a whiff of a rising dawn fog, she launched herself forward. For a moment, she actually flew. She had not been able to practice, of course, with a suit in the air before, but she had innately a sense of balance. Had she been prettier, she might have been able to live as a dancer. But as it was, she felt the waves of the wind, its gusts and its swirlings, the minute corrections the suit's wingtips needed, and gliding to west, she actually flew. But then it was over. The suit, after all, had been made for one person. As light as it was from the sickness that struck him down, the added burden of Crow's body tied to Rat's strained the suit's wings too much. First, with a crack, the right wing folded, the wires that stiffened it shattering in pieces, Crow and Rat spinning. And then the left too, leaving only the fabric that flapped between Rat's outstretched arms and her torso to hold them aloft, to act as a glider's wings, although not sufficient to take them beyond the river's center. She fell with a great splash, a shower of feathers loosed by the impact, caught in the wind, sprinkling over the tomb's wall. That much at least reached their destination. But for Rat and Crow themselves, there was just darkness as the river's waters covered them over, poisoning Rat instantly. Acids and wastes already accelerating Crow's own body's deterioration. Then there was silence, except in the tombs where a gate guard had seen Crow and Rat as she readied herself to launch. Fearing some ghoul's trick, perhaps to seize the newly delivered dead, taking by surprise what strength might not gain for them, he had summoned the guard captain. This one in turn called the curator to him, who made notes and sketches as Rat's and Crow's flight played out. Then the next night, the curator asked the corpse train drivers in turn what gossip they might have heard that might explain it. And so in time, he had gathered the stories, wisps and pieces together into the tale of Crow and Rat as it is written here. He had a copy etched on metal and buried with a few of the wind's feathers that actually drifted across the tomb's wall. And he had a stone carved with a picture of the two, taken from the best of his sketches, combined with descriptions from some of the guards as they struck the river. And he had it mounted above those few remnants. There it stands to this day. And I thank you, and if you enjoyed that, early November 6th, I think, come again to Morgenstern's and hear another tale of the tombs. That's it.
Thanks so much, James. Always good to hear you. I liked hearing you at 4th Street too. Let's go now to our musical guest, Ed Pedersen, with another set. Fantastic, Ed. Thanks so much. I'm seeing in the comments people are hearing, or in the chat here, people are talking about car chases and car alarms, and I'm hearing the soundtrack to Mandy, that Nick Cage movie from a couple of years ago. It's like a Frank Franzetti painting come to life. Anyway, that's my brain. Thanks so much, Ed. We'll have a final piece from Ed after our final feature, who is Josh COONROD. Excuse me. Josh COONROD is a horror writer and English instructor at Jefferson Community and Technical College in Louisville, Kentucky. He holds an MA in English from the University of Florida and a PhD in Communication and Culture from Indiana University. October 31st, 1985, 6 Stories of Halloween is his first book. Please welcome Josh COONROD.
Thank you all so much for everyone watching. Thank you for inviting me, especially Joan, who invited me specifically, and it means a lot to me. I'm going to be doing a reading for my book, October 31st, 1985. And I always have to show the cover because my friend Arthur Colfer made such a cool cover for it. And I think it's probably the only reason people read it outside of my friends and family. So thank you very much to Arthur. In order to give a little ambiance, I'm going to try to read this in the dark by candlelight. So that's why the screen is the way it is. Fingers crossed. We'll see if that works. The story I'm going to read out of it is called Dirty Bones. So all of the stories are about Halloween in a small town like the one I grew up in the 80s. And this was the first story I had an idea for years and years ago, and it had just kind of stuck in my head. And it wasn't even a Halloween story at first, but then as I started to tell it, it kind of became a Halloween story, and the whole book turned into a Halloween book. So here's Dirty Bones. Robbie Jacobs was accustomed to the whispers and the stares his family was on the receiving end of. He was having more trouble getting used to the idea that the ground had started whispering to him. It had all begun a couple months ago, walking from school to meet his mother at her job, voices appearing faintly from just under his shoes. Robbie, Robbie. The voices were quiet, but he knew they were there. What he didn't know was what they wanted. At first. Before that, he wondered what they could possibly even want from him. His mom and his dad had nothing except the house over their heads. And if the voices in the ground wanted that, he figured they could suck it straight into the dirt themselves. But what did he have to give them? Worn out sneakers, a backpack with one strap broken and a hole in the bottom, hair longer than he wanted it to be because his mom didn't want to pay for a barber and he didn't trust her with a pair of scissors. It had been over a year since Robbie's dad left. He didn't explain why, except to call Robbie's mom crazy, say he did everything around there, and act like they were lucky he was letting them keep the house. As they would find out, though, the house was nowhere near as close to paid off as he had acted like it was. Robbie's mom said his dad had probably spent all the family's money on girls instead. Things went downhill quickly after that. Robbie's mom had always tried to keep up her appearance, keep a nice house, and keep Robbie out of trouble. Now, she didn't care about anything. She didn't get out of bed for a long time. Robbie's grandma and aunt came in from out of town, but they didn't stay long. His mom told them that she wasn't going anywhere and that Robbie's dad might come back. After a couple months, she started getting jobs, and none of them stuck. She'd come home saying how much she hated everyone, how mean they were to her. And a few days later, she'd be looking for a job at another bank, then another salon, then another restaurant. She'd always held tight to Robbie, though. Put her arm around his shoulders and told him she'd never leave him. Sometimes she'd smell his hair, and sometimes she would cry. That's when people started looking at them. When she dropped him off at school, when they went to the store, when they'd come by the places that she was waiting tables. They didn't even try to hide it. Side glances, raised eyebrows. His mom would meet their stares at times and then pat Robbie on the hand and tell him it was okay. But he wanted to be left alone. And that's the one thing that no one would do anymore. They were in the grocery store and his mom started to cry in the bread aisle. One of the teachers from school came up from behind Robbie, grabbed him by the arm and said, "Here, son, maybe I can help you out." Robbie hit him as hard as he could. He got expelled, and ever since he was one of the bad kids. Even though he didn't want anything from anyone, he just wanted everyone to be quiet and go away. And that's when Rick showed up. Robbie wasn't sure what Rick did for a living, but he worked at a bank, drove a Mercedes, and he had the whitest teeth that Robbie had ever seen. He also had sunglasses everywhere, like it made him look cool. Robbie thought it made him look like a schmuck. Rick and Robbie's mom had met at Tito's, the Mexican restaurant, where sometimes she waited tables and sometimes she tended bar. It seemed like a good fit for her because everyone was quiet and kept their heads down. No one stirred up Robbie's mom, and when she came home, she was tired, but she wasn't mad. But after she met Rick, Robbie never knew if she was going to come home at all. "Hey, you're a big guy, you'll be all right," Rick said. One time when he picked Robbie and Robbie's mom up from Tito's, but only dropped off Robbie. Robbie thought his mom would come home that night. When he woke up in the morning, she wasn't there. He was pretty sure he was the only fifth grader who'd spent the night alone at home. And that's when the ground started talking. "Robbie, Robbie." He looked for the voices when he first heard them, and then he'd try to answer them, even digging into the ground and shouting. Finally, he tried ignoring them. None of the options changed anything. "Robbie, Robbie." Like a slow, quiet scratching at the surface of the earth, like something so close that wanted to get to him, that wanted to say something, but just couldn't quite. It went from being terrifying to being annoying to a maddening pulse that seemed like it would always be there, begging for something that Robbie couldn't give it. He saw his mother start to change. She'd always cared about her appearance, other than when Robbie's dad left. But now she agonized over it, switching out dresses over and over for a single date, getting lost in the mirror for hours on her makeup, going through earrings, necklaces, and bracelets that she hadn't worn in years. And if the slightest thing went wrong, a spot on her shirt, a bad glance in the mirror, she would all but break down. She said she loved Rick and that she was so happy to be around him, but then seemed almost miserable now that as she was when Robbie's dad had left. Nothing was ever good enough anymore. But it wasn't all her fault. In the few months since she'd been with Rick, Robbie saw him break dates with her countless times. Half the time when she'd already spent an hour getting ready for him. Sometimes on the most important nights when he'd promised her the nicest dinners at the fanciest restaurants. Robbie's mom would usually spiral when that happened. She'd act friendly on the phone, but after that, Robbie never knew what was coming. She might quietly sulk into her room, not to be seen for the rest of the night. She might start crying and shouting and throwing things. Sometimes her tone would turn mean, and she would swear Rick was with Michelle again, his ex-wife, and she'd curse Michelle for leading Rick along. And then Rick introduced Alice. Alice was Rick and Michelle's daughter from when they were married, just a couple of years younger than Robbie. Rick had waited weeks into the relationship before saying anything about her. But as soon as he did, he acted like Alice was was a big part of their family. A part of the family he was more than happy to leave with Robbie and his mom at any time for any reason. When Alice showed up, the voices from the crowd started to get louder. "Robbie, Robbie, Robbie." Robbie's mom acted like having Alice at the house was a good thing. "You've got a little sister now," she would exclaim, like she and Rick were already married. Alice didn't feel like a little sister, though. She wasn't mean, but she wasn't much of anything. She was a quiet girl who spent most of her time around Rick and his mom, staring blankly at the house and waiting to leave. Almost any time Robbie said anything to her, she shrugged. If she ever got a word out, it was usually it was a singular yeah or no. Robbie's mom encouraged him again and again to be nice to her, which left Robbie at a loss. He was trying to be nice to her. Why did people always have to assume he was mean? But no matter how hard he tried, she was unresponsive. And Robbie thought he knew why. He'd noticed it one time when Rick had taken them all out to eat. Robbie sat across the dinner from his mom, Alice next to Robbie, Rick next to Robbie's mom. Michelle had been there on a date that night. She stopped by the table as they were leaving. Michelle was dazzling. Everyone there was looking at her, but not in the way they looked at Robbie and his mom. She had on a tight, sparkly dress, but it wasn't too tight and it wasn't too sparkly. Her silky white blonde hair had swept perfectly down over the side of her face, and her skin was so clearly tanned without a mark on it anywhere. And that's when Robbie looked over at Rick and then to Alice. It was all so effortless. Rick and Michelle were just naturally perfect. He looked at his mom with her fried blonde curls and heavy makeup, and he looked at the frayed strings dangling from the cuffs of his flannel shirt. He shrunk down into the corner of the booth, just hoping no one would see him. When Michelle politely introduced herself to him and his mom, it just made things worse. The voices from the ground got even louder and more persistent that night. Robbie, 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 Robbie. That was the one night he thought about telling his mom about the voices. But then he got home, and she was quick to deliver bad news. Honey, Rick and I are going to a Halloween party this year. I'm gonna let you take Alice around our neighborhood, and then Alice's mom is gonna pick both of you up and take you around town. Robbie was horrified. He loved Halloween, and even with him and his mom strapped for cash, he'd always figured out a costume to trick or treat, especially this year. He was going to wear his black jeans and his black sweatshirt, and he was going to color the white parts of his black shoes black. Then he was going to go to his mom's makeup and paint his face white. Then if anyone ever asked him if he was a mime, he was just going to shrug and not say anything. It might not be the commando costume he wanted, but it would be good enough to get a few pieces of candy dropped into his pillowcase. Thank God they didn't have to do the stupid costume parade at the middle school that they made the elementary school kids do. But now his costume felt worthless. His ingenious idea would just look like junk next to Alice and her mom. Why couldn't everyone just leave him alone? I don't want to do that, he whimpered to his mom. Robbie, I don't ask for much, but this night is important to me. And Alice and her mom are very nice people, and I'm sure you'll have a great time. It was funny, she hadn't called Alice's mom a very nice person the other night when Rick had canceled their date just before he was supposed to pick her up. And here it was, Halloween night. And the voices from the ground were louder than ever, their calls overlapping one another in disarray. Robbie, 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 Robbie. He tried to block them out as he pulled together his costume, rubbing his mother's makeup on his face, trying to make it white enough. What did they want? Why wouldn't they just leave him alone? Why did they keep getting worse? He wanted to say something to his mom, but she was moving around the house at high velocity, trying to get her kitten costume to be just perfect. She told Robbie to watch Alice, but Alice was fine. Rick had dropped her off after school, all shiny and perfect in her fairy costume. Rick never even explained why Robbie and his mom needed to take care of her until Michelle could show up. Robbie sat on the couch and put his hands over his ears, trying to feel better. He wanted his mom to calm down. He wanted Alice to go away. He wanted the voices from the ground to tell him what they wanted and to just be quiet. He was almost crying when he looked up and saw Alice across the room. He understood. He got up and he took her by the hand. Angel, Robbie's mom, couldn't find her kitten ears. She was tearing the house apart, looking under pillows, between couch cushions, all around the kitchen table. They seemed to have vanished. She needed to calm down. She knew it. She could tell she was stressing Robbie out, and the last thing she wanted was Alice going back to her mom, or God forbid, Rick, and telling them Angel was acting like a disorganized madwoman all night. This Halloween party was supposed to be perfect. Everyone would see her and Rick there together, and it would make things so much more official. But it felt like everything was slipping right out of her grasp. Why did everything have to be so hard? When Marshall, Robbie's father, left them months ago, it felt like everything was over. She didn't know how to do anything. Marshall made good money at the electric company, and she was supposed to focus on raising Robbie. But Marshall couldn't keep himself under control. All the drinking, all the fights, nothing was ever good enough. Nothing was ever perfect. How could a slob like that be mad that nothing was ever just right, her mother had asked her. Her mother and her sister had said she needed to be sure to sue for child support, but she wasn't sure she wasn't sure where Marshall even went. And if she did sue, she didn't know if he would come back. She didn't know if he would ever come back. She couldn't even decide if she wanted him back. She knew her mother thought she was weak. She knew her sister thought that she should just get over it. But every morning when she just couldn't get out of bed, it felt pointless. Nothing was going to get better. There was no way out. There was nothing. She and Robbie would float through a life that was falling apart, and eventually she would die. That's all that was left at this point. Even when she started working again, it was like every day was being dragged through the gears just to get out of bed. She would do it for Robbie's sake, counting other people's money, cleaning up other people's hair, bringing other people's food, but almost every moment of it ached. If she couldn't tell how hard everything seemed to be for Robbie, how sad he looked, how quiet he'd gotten, she would have just given up. All that miserable work for ungrateful people, it was all for him. And then she met Rick. He was at Tito's drinking beers with his friends, laughing a little too loud, but he seemed so comfortable. And he smiled at her, and he talked to her, and he waited for his friends to go ahead without him, and he kept talking to her. At a job where everyone was almost mute, Rick lit up the space with his jokes and his questions and his small touches to Angel's waist and arms. She introduced him to Robbie slowly, still unsure about how upset Robbie would be about his father leaving. He hadn't lashed out at Rick or even been unpleasant to him. Robbie was a good kid, despite what people seemed to think, and he didn't cause trouble. But she could also tell the whole thing must have disturbed him. He became quieter, talking to her less, mentioning fewer friends from school, always staring down at his feet. She could cheer him up and get him to talk from time to time, but it was never long before he was drawn back into his shell, avoiding everyone. She really wanted to help him more, but she just didn't know what to do. Rick was sucking up so much of her time. He loved her, but he asked a lot of her. He took her to nice places and introduced her to nice people, but he always wanted everything to be just in its place. Like little comments about her clothes, her hair, her makeup. He looked so good all the time in suits, and Angel just wanted to keep up, but she didn't know how to do it. It was as if it was as if how he looked when she saw him was who he was naturally, and she was a fraud, desperately trying to put on a face that wasn't hers. When he started dropping Alice off at their house, she felt used at first. Did he think she just didn't have anything else to worry about? But then she realized it made them much closer to being a family. Alice getting to know Robbie, seeing him as a brother, getting used to their house, spending more time with them. But why was Rick gone more and more? Angel shook herself back to reality. Where were the kids? Robbie had been in and out of the bathroom as he played with his mother's makeup, and Alice had been sitting on the couch. Turning a 360 in the living room, she realized that they were nowhere to be found. Robbie? Alice? She shouted, with her voice automatically rising and with anxiety. It wasn't a big house. There weren't many places for them to be. Alice? She shouted again, heading back to her bedroom, scanning the room, looking under her bed, ducking into the bathroom, and even pulling her shower curtain back. Her heart began to pound harder than usual. Had Robbie been acting stranger today than usual? Robbie? Alice? She screamed almost at the top of her lungs. She rushed into Robbie's room and threw open the closet. Nothing. Robbie and Alice, please answer me. She almost tripped running into the bathroom, and she banged her knee into the door frame going back into the living room and then the kitchen. Nothing. She opened the door to the garage. Please don't let Alice be out here. She'll be a mess, Angel thought. And then she realized it didn't matter if Alice was covered in dirt head to toe. She just wanted to find her. She opened the door to the garage. Please don't. Oh, She rushed out into the front yard, dewy overgrown grass brushing her ankles. It was empty. No kids were even milling through the streets yet for trick-or-treating. But it seemed so dark for no kids to even be out yet. Why was it so dark? She ran to the corner of the house, heading to the backyard. She swore she could feel the ground shaking underneath her feet. For a moment, the backyard looked empty, a small rectangle of grass leading back to the trees behind it. But it was just light enough to see Robbie in the distance. He was facing away from her, looking down at something. She rushed behind him through the yard, between the trees, and found him staring down at a pile of dirt in the ground. A pile of dirt almost looked large enough to hold a person. Robbie moved, she managed to say, moving to her, dropping to her knees and starting to claw at the dirt in front of her. Mom, Robbie said. The soil was loose and Angel's hands moved right through it, but they found nothing. For a second, she thought she saw a strand of pale blonde hair like Alice's, but in a blink it was gone. Robbie, help me, she shouted, the loose ground scattered everywhere, now down to hard earth that her fingers couldn't penetrate. There was nothing there, but there had to be. She could feel it. Why couldn't she find it? Why couldn't she see anything? Mom, Robbie said, pulling on the back of her black cat costume. She turned, eyes wide, tears running down her cheeks, face and hands covered in dirt. She looked wild and confused, but Robbie looked as calm as he had in months. They don't want us, Mom, he said. We're not good enough. They just want them. Thank you.
That was great and extremely atmospheric there in the dim with the candles going. That was great, Josh. Thanks so much. I too am from a small town, and they're just inherently creepy, even if nothing creepy happens. They just are. So let's have a final piece from our musical guest, Ed Pedersen. Thanks once again, Ed Pedersen. That was a great one to close on. Extra creepy. And I think that's going to do it for our October edition. I want to thank our featured readers this evening, Josh COONROD, James Dorr, and DODIE Bellamy, and of course, our musical guest, Ed Pedersen. Be sure and join us right back here at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday, November 2nd, just right around the corner, it feels like, when we'll have Janice Lee, Soleil David, Annette Cizon, and music by Paul Weber. That's right back here Wednesday, November 2nd. Be sure and sign up for the newsletter at our website on behalf of the Writers Guild of Bloomington. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and I hope to see you all soon. Have a good night.